the weekly show with David J. Maloney.
This week, David chats with blues artist Joanne Shaw Taylor.
And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got a really special guest. Her music journey started at just the age of 16 and has taken her from playing local shows in her hometown to being on stage at the Queen of England's Diamond Jubilee as the lead guitarist for Annie Lennox. She's had multiple stellar solo albums, and her newest album, Heavy Soul, seems to be poised to be a chart topper once again. Here to chat about it all after the break is guitarist Joanne Shaw Taylor. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight is an accomplished and well-respected guitarist in the blues rock genre. She got her start at the age of just 16 upon being discovered by Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics, and she hasn't slowed down since. Her impressive chops have earned her a place working with some of the best in the business, and over the last 2 decades, she has amassed a sizable catalog of critically acclaimed solo albums. Here to chat about it all, and her new record, Heavy Soul, is none other than Joanne Shaw Taylor. Joanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So where did your love of music come from? Was it like a family legacy, or did it come to you in some other way?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I grew up in a very musical household. My dad played guitar, massive blues fan, sort of the typical English lad that grew up in the 60s and got to watch Jimi Hendrix on Top of the Pops and all of, the Rolling Stones and the Brit blues invasion. My older brother also played guitar, massive shredder, heavy metal fan. So slight different genre to me. And then my mom was a dancer and a massive lover of Motown and soul music. So there was always music playing in the house.
So that's the kind of music that filled the halls of your home growing up. Now, my understanding is that you started off being classically trained and then at some point segued over.
Yeah, I started playing classical guitar at school. They offered lessons from the age of 8, which I did. And it gave me enough confidence to know I could play guitar, which is nice at that age, particularly when you're sort of quite average at school and, sports. But just found it very, very disciplined. And then, yes, my dad played me a Steve Ray Vaughan DVD, and there was just something about that style of guitar playing he was a very technical guitar player, but blues for me was much more about, there weren't really as many rules. It was about how you put your personality into the instrument and use it to express yourself. So I just sort of love that sense of freedom that it gave me.
Now, a significant part of your story is that you were discovered by Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics. What is the chain of events that led to that moment for you?
That was kind of a strange one, actually, because it really came down to the fact my mom at the time had breast cancer when I was 15. And had undergone a mastectomy and was having chemo. And it was a friend of hers at her gym had also undergone treatment for it and was doing a charity gig for it was called Breast Friends. It was a support group for women with breast cancer. And they asked me to perform, which I did. And it just so happened a friend of Dave's was in the audience, and I'd done a little demo CD and he passed it on to him. So it was, one of those really bizarre things that, obviously, if my mom hadn't have had breast cancer, it probably wouldn't have happened. But which is a horrible thing to realize that it is what happened.
Yeah, it's an odd butterfly effect moment there.
Yeah.
So did you get a call at some point from Dave himself, or how did that come? What was the next step in that chain of events?
We phoned our landline to age myself the next day and spoke to my dad, and I was in my bedroom playing guitar, practicing, and my dad came running in going, "Dave Stewart's just phoned. He's doing a record label. He wants to sign you." And I went, "Oh, that's cool. Who's Dave Stewart?" And he's like, "Eurythmics." And I'm like, "I've got no idea what that is. It's the year 2000 and I live in Solihull." And he went, "Annie Lennox." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I kind of know that name." And he said, he wants us to go down to London tomorrow and take you down there and to meet him. And all I thought was, oh, that's good, because I was meant to be in school tomorrow. So that sounds like a good day off, to be honest. But that always made his wife laugh, that I had no idea who he was.
At what point did you realize, okay, this might actually be a potentially life-changing moment for me?
I think I remember going to Dave's, I think it was his 50th birthday. And when we left, it was like a private, room in a restaurant. And when we left, you couldn't see anything for light bulbs going off because the paparazzi were there, because Bono was there and Damien Hirst and Annie and Dave. And I think at that point I kind of realized this isn't what most of my friends at school do on a weekend, you know. So I think there was that moment of like, oh, I'm very lucky to be doing this. You know, it's an experience that most people don't get.
Now, at what point in the journey did I, and I'm going to make an assumption here, that at what point in your journey did Dave introduce you to Annie Lennox, or did not come by an introduction from him? What sticks out to you the most about that first meeting with Annie?
I don't remember the first meeting. She was just always around, to be honest, because I mean, they're still very close. And what was really lovely was because I'd moved to London and was living with another female artist on the label, Nadira X from Jamaica, and we're still best friends. Her daughter's my goddaughter. I just had this nice crew. We'd go out with Annie and Anushka, Dave's wife. So, you know, more on a personal level, it was incredible to be surrounded by these very strong, successful, brilliant, loving, you know, kick-ass kind of women, really, from a young age, who were from, you know, Annie's Annie Lennox, but she's from Scotland, and Nads was from Kingston, Jamaica, and I'm from a small village, and Anushka grew up in Paris. You know, that's the lovely thing about music, is it really opens up your life, your social circle.
One event that really stuck out to me when reading about your music journey is when you played lead guitar for Annie Lennox at the Queen of England's Diamond Jubilee. I mean, for an entire country, there's hardly a bigger and more unique occasion. What's the story there, and how did that gig come about for you?
That was just one of those fluky things. Annie was performing and she decided she wanted to do a bluesier version of There Must Be an Angel. And I guess her and a musical director were sitting around one day thinking about who they could get in to perform on it. And yeah, I mean, I hadn't spoke to her in years, and she remembered me, and I got an email the next day saying Annie Lennox is trying to get hold of you. And yeah, I said yes, obviously. She said, there's a big gig this weekend. Do you want to do it? And I knew, you know, because I mean, I was in England at the time and everything was gearing up for it. So I guess the big gig was probably going to be that big gig. But again, on a personal level at the time, my mom was going a lot of chemo for ovarian. Unfortunately, we did lose her the following March. But I do remember it was starting to get tough for her, and getting that phone call, it was like a new lease on life for her. She was going shopping for an outfit to wear, and you know, I'm going like, Mom, you're not coming. You're just watching it on the television. So it was just, you know, on a personal thing, it was so amazing that my mom got to see that.
Famously, your pedal board did not cooperate with you on that day.
It did not.
What was going through your head when your pedal board was not functioning properly at the time of your solo? I mean, at any time during those, I would presume, nervy moments, did you think the solo might actually come off better that way?
I don't know. I think I just thought, well, it is what it is. Because what had happened was I was standing back by the pedal board, and we're all on ears because it's such an unusual gig. The monarchy can't be seen to be endorsing any brand, so we weren't allowed our amps on the stage. They were underneath the stage, so I was already quite far away from the amp on a wireless. The plan was I was to play rhythm, and then when it's time for the solo, I was to hit the boost pedal and walk towards Annie. And looking back on it, what I'd done was I was playing rhythm with the boost on, and then I turned it off and walked towards Annie for the solo. But of course, I couldn't. You know, you're on live television in front of millions of people, plus there's millions of people there. It's like, well, I can't just walk back. So it was just that thing of like, well, it's working. It is what it is. It's a bit quiet, but hey ho. Yeah, I think in that moment, it's, you know, what else are you going to do? You just got to roll with it, haven't you?
What was it like to find out Stevie Wonder actually loved the sound you brought to that performance and complimented you on it? I mean, did you find out from Stevie himself, or was that a comment you read somewhere afterwards?
No, his guitar, I think it was his drum tech flagged me down on the night as I was trying to leave. And we got chatting, and he's like, oh, Stevie, you know, was trying to find you to tell you that he loved your clean bluesy sound. I was like, oh, well, thanks, because it was kind of a happy accident, but, you know, please tell Stevie thank you for me. So no, that was, which I thought was very, very sweet of him to make the effort to come find me.
Well, it's funny because it kind of creates a little bridge between, I was going to ask you some questions about, you know, you working heavily with Joe Bonamassa, who was on our show earlier this year. How did you first meet Joe, and did you guys hit it off right away? I mean, what did you guys bond over?
We did. It's funny, I was talking about this yesterday to somebody asked, and I met him in 2008, I think. I opened up for him at a festival in Norway. And it's one of those events where it's in the middle of nowhere in Norway, and all the artists are put in the same sort of little lodge. And I bumped into him afterwards, and he'd watched me play. I think he'd asked us up to jam as well, and we got chatting and ended up all night just sitting in the lobby chatting. And it was, I'm very lucky that I've still got my two best friends from school who've known me, since I was two. But only Joe knows what it's like to sit in the back of a car when you're 14 years old and have your mum and dad drive you over to, or fly you to Switzerland to play with BB King. So not that we were sort of Macaulay Culkin and massive child stars, but it was a slightly different thing that most children don't sort of go through.
Tell us about your new album, Heavy Soul. What's the story of this album, and what started this album for you? Was it a theme, a note, an idea, a song that grew out from there, or how tell us a little bit about that, please?
This was a sort of interesting album for me because the previous album, Nobody's Fool, was quite a departure for me from my catalogue, which was because through COVID I'd done an album called The Blues Album, which was an album of all blues covers, and then we did a second album to that, a live version. So I sort of felt like, well, I've done two of the most traditional blues albums I'm probably ever going to do. So when it came to writing the previous album, I just sort of thought, why don't I just have some fun and kind of write as catchy a choruses as I can, and not sort of feel pressured to do something particularly bluesy, and could put out kind of more of a poppy album, and no one's going to panic that I'm changing direction suddenly because I've, just done two very traditional blues albums. So when it came to Heavy Soul, the challenge for me was, how do I look back when I'm hopefully 105 years old and go, okay, Nobody's Fool doesn't completely stick out as a strange album. How do I do this album, go from Nobody's Fool back into more of a roots arena? So I had two songs left over from the Nobody's Fool sessions, which ended up being A Good Goodbye and I think it was Wild Love. And then I wrote Sweet Little Lies quite quickly, which was more still poppy, but more bluesy rock. So I kind of felt like, oh, okay, this has gone quite nicely from pop back into, I don't want to scare the fan base too much. I've not lost my mind. I'm not going to start singing country songs. So yeah, that was kind of the main thing for me.
Is there a song you're most proud of on this record, or is that kind of like trying to decide which child of yours is your favorite?
Yeah, I always joke that it is a bit like trying to pick your favorite child, but I do have favorites, and I think most parents probably have favorite children as well. So I think Sweet Little Lies actually was probably one of them, because that was a different one for me. I wrote it on piano, and I can't play the piano, so that was a bit of a challenge. But I think it was really nice to sit down and, I play guitar so much that it's often easy to slip into the same chord progressions and repeat yourself. So it was quite freeing to sit at an instrument that, I don't automatically know where to go, and just follow where the melody is, where the melody wants to go. So I think that one was one I was quite proud of.
Yeah, that reminds me of how John Fogerty was famously sued for plagiarizing himself.
You do worry about that, because there was a song on I've just recorded recently, Not for Heavy Soul, that was a song I wrote very early in my career, and I still didn't feel like I got it right. So I kind of reworked it and changed it, and I was like, can anybody sue me for this? I mean, technically I'm plagiarizing myself, so and then I thought of that. So hopefully I will not sue myself.
There you go. Was there a song that surprised you once you finished recording it with how well it came out? In other words, sometimes, you kind of go into something and then, I mean, you know how it works. And then something just comes out, more brilliantly than you thought. Was there one that kind of fit that mold?
There's a track on the album called Black Magic that we released early on as a single. And interestingly, I'd had that for ages, but it was just an acoustic instrumental that I meant to put out as like, when you flip over the vinyl, that's like the first little segue into the rest of the album. And just for fun, thought I'd have a crack at writing lyrics to it just to make sure it wasn't a different song. And wrote lyrics very quickly. And then Kevin Shirley added these amazing backing vocals that are more like a give and take between me and the backing singers that really give it live, which I'm so glad I did that, and it was just didn't end up being me playing the riff on acoustic guitar. So that worked out very well, I thought.
And I was going to ask you, was there any direction from, and you mentioned Kevin Shirley, who's a legendary producer. Was there any direction that Kevin gave you that you think paid off a massive dividend in the song? Was it that, or did he do it in some other songs too?
I think more importantly with Kevin, it was probably his choice of covers. He picked quite a few covers for this album. I think we did 3. And they're songs I either hadn't heard or had heard and would never have thought of covering. So, for example, someone like You, which is a Van Morrison song that I absolutely love, and is used heavily in the Bridget Jones soundtrack, which is also, being a British woman in her 30s, is a film genre I love. So yeah, things like that he's really, really instrumental at.
Where did the album name Heavy Soul come from? What does what does Heavy Soul mean to you, I guess?
That actually was a song I'd written with the idea of giving it to Eric Gales. Joe had reached out to me during COVID and was doing an album with Eric and just asked if I had any songs that I thought might be suitable for him, which I said I didn't, but I'd have a go at writing something. And at that time, to be honest, the whole George, sorry, I got a puppy whining. Black Lives Matters, was very present in everyone's lives. And it was Eric, really. He put up this quote on Facebook or Instagram that said, "If you don't care about the color of my skin, I don't care whether you respect me as a musician, or if you don't respect the color of my," something along those lines. I'm power quoting, but and I shared it because I wanted to support him, and I wanted to support the movement in that I'm a blues artist. The only reason I have this life that I have, and more importantly, have a means of expressing myself that has changed my life, is because of the oppression of a group of people. So I just assumed we, as blues fans, we all respected that history, and there was quite a lot of negative feedback to it. So the song idea for Heavy Soul was, and it kind of morphed from that to just a general, we don't know what battles people are facing on an everyday basis, whether that's racism or homophobia or cancer or alcoholism, or we just don't know what it's like to walk in another person's skin. But we can be open-eared to listening and trying to be a bit more understanding. So it was really about that. It's about, someone living a life that's a lot harder than you realize it is. And, we should show more support, I suppose.
You're often classified as a blues or say blues rock guitarist. What do you think it means to write or play the blues or soul? Or, in your mind, what makes the blues, well, the blues?
I think the thing I loved about it, as I said earlier, from the day one was, learning from guitar players like Stevie Ray Vaughan. I think for me, it was again, watching Stevie Ray Vaughan and Albert Collins is a really good example. You would never, as a guitar teacher, tell someone to play guitar like Albert Collins. It was such a bizarre technique and then a weird tuning with a capo, but it worked and it was fantastic. And when you turn on the radio, within 3 seconds, you could say, that's Albert Collins. So I think what I really, really loved about it and still love about it is it's just a means of you taking music and using it to express yourself in any way that you feel represents you. And I think I've achieved that to a certain extent in my guitar playing. I think I'm definitely not the world's best guitar player. I often get Joe in the studio to do the songs that, I think he's far more capable of playing a good solo on than me. But I like my guitar playing and it sounds like me. So I think that was, that was the main thing for me, was it's just a vehicle to, release your emotions. But I think unlike a lot of genres, it's got less discipline, if maybe discipline's the wrong word, it's got less boundaries, more,
You mentioned your sound. What has been the process to finding your sound? How long do you think it took for you to find your musical signature or identity?
I think that's still evolving, and I think in recent years it's evolved a lot. I always say that, when I look back, I want my first album, White Sugar, sounds like Joanne when she was 22 years old, and Heavy Souls sounds like a 39-year-old Joanne, and it's still, I think they all tie together. But, you know, I'm not the same woman I was when I was 22. Physically or otherwise, the vocal cords are not the same vocal cords after, you know, 20 years of touring. So I think it's been there sort of loosely from the get-go, you know, because I think I had a strong mind of who I was as a person and who I wanted to be as an artist. And I can say, you know, I've never put out anything I'm not proud of or I didn't feel was me. But yeah, so I think it's been there from the get-go, but it's definitely evolved over years.
For the I'll learn how to speak. For the gearheads who follow along, are there any particular guitars which played a role in you finding that sound?
100%. Junior, my main guitar. It's a 1966 Esquire that's very beaten up. It's got a beautiful neck. And I got it cheap, actually. I was working in a guitar shop when I was 15 on the weekends and then gigging as well. And my grandmother, bless her, come from very working class black country background, you know, which is sort of the Detroit of England, I suppose. And was seeing how hard I was working and said, look, whatever you earn and save for, you know, I wanted a decent guitar, I'll match. So I think I got about £700 together, and bless her, she did match it for my Christmas present. And I got the train down to London, went to a vintage guitar shop and just found that guitar and fell in love with it. And I've still to this day, I can't imagine doing a gig without that guitar. I think if I lost it, I don't know. I don't know if I'd continue, to be honest. I'm sure I would, but I'd be very upset.
Which guitars make an appearance in Heavy Soul?
Junior, and then my main Les Paul, which is a 2009 custom shop. I mean, to be honest, I'm not a big guitar collector. I'm very lazy like that. I just think it's one more thing I've got to carry around. I hate having to change a guitar on stage, so I don't do it unless it's necessary, like if, you know, it's in a different tuning or it's an acoustic. So yeah, it's pretty much my main three, which is Junior, the Les Paul, and then I've got a guitar that was gifted to me by Dave Stewart, which is, it's a 55 maple telly neck on a Warmoth body that is very much, it's a bit of a cross between a Les Paul and a telly because it's a very heavy body. And I think Dave used it in the original Sweet Dreams video, so that's obviously a very guitar that's very close to my heart.
Are there any musicians whom you've always wanted to play with whom the opportunity has not yet arisen?
Ooh, I would love to work with Chris Stapleton. If I could sing like a man, that's what I'd want to sound like. I just think, what a songwriter. I love Pink. That's one of the best shows I've ever been to. What a incredible rock voice. I was disappointed. I honestly thought she was going to get the gig in Queen before Adam Lambert, which I would have thought would have been fantastic. So yeah, there's a lot outside of, you know, the sort of the genres I'm thought of, to be honest. I love Lainey Wilson because I kind of think the point of working with an artist that's not yourself is someone who's different to you, you know, something that you can't do. So there's a lot. I would love to write with Jason Isbell. I think he's one of the best songwriters we've got out at the moment too. I'm sure none of this will ever happen, but it would be lovely if it did.
So you're currently on tour, and it brings you, I think, in and out of the U.S. and back to the U.S. What can you tell us about your current tour?
Well, it's a really good, in terms of set, it's a really good mix of my previous few albums, the recent ones, so the blues album, Heavy Soul, we're obviously doing a lot of the new album, and Nobody's Fool. And yeah, we're out, it's the usual summer chaos, so we're in the States for 2 weeks, then we go to Europe for 2 weeks, then we come back for 2 weeks, and but I'm super thrilled to be doing it, and I love festival season. It's always a good, fun kind of change of pace from playing theaters and clubs. So really, really looking forward to it, and, you know, mingling with some other artists. It's a chance to see other musicians play too.
Joanne, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joanne Shaw Taylor. That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to Joanne Shaw Taylor for joining us. Stay safe, everyone.